Montana Territory, autumn of 1881. The first snow came early that year, thick and quiet, settling over the Bitterroot Valley like a warning. Travis Allard reined in his horse outside the weathered barn, boots crunching in the frost as he dismounted. Something had shifted in the air around his land, some small thing just off-center. The cattle were restless and the dogs hadn't settled all night. He pushed open the barn doors, breath misting as he stepped into the warm, hay-scented dark. That was when he saw her. A woman curled up in the hayloft, her back to the wall, one arm draped protectively over two sleeping children. Her dress was threadbare, her boots cracked at the toes, and her body looked too thin for the cold. The little ones, one boy, one girl, were tucked close against her, each no older than 5 or 6. The boy clutched a toy horse carved from pine. The girl had her hand knotted in her mother's shawl. Travis held still. His voice came low, not wanting to wake the children. "Ma'am," she startled, eyes wide with fear, but she didn't scream, just sat up fast, shielding the kids with her body. He raised his hands. "I ain't here to hurt you. This is my land. That barn's mine." "But I reckon you already knew that." Her shoulders dropped a little, though she didn't let her guard down. "We were just trying to get out of the wind," she said, voice hoarse and dry. "We'll be gone by morning." Travis looked at the kids again. Their cheeks were flushed with cold. The girl's shoes were mismatched. He shook his head. "You got names?" She hesitated. "Faye Zimmerman," she said finally. "That's Violet and Victor." He nodded once. "Well, Faye Zimmerman, you and your little ones ain't sleeping in no hayloft tonight. Come on, I got a house. It ain't fancy, but it's warm. You can stay in the front room." Faye's arms tightened around the children. "We don't need charity." Travis met her eyes. "This ain't charity, it's decency." She studied his face, eyes searching for some sign of trickery. Whatever she saw must have been enough, because she gave a small nod. "All right," she whispered. "Just for a night." He helped her down the ladder, careful not to spook the children. Violet blinked up at him with sleepy suspicion, clutching her mother's leg. Victor didn't speak, just watched Travis with eyes too old for his age. The walk to the house was silent. Snow crunched underfoot. Travis opened the front door, letting the warmth spill out. The hearth was still burning from earlier, and the smell of coffee hung in the air. He led them into the sitting room, grabbing extra blankets from the chest near the stairs. "I'll fix up the guest room," he said. "It's just me here, got more space than I need." Faye stepped in slowly, her eyes scanning the room like she didn't trust it to be real. Violet went straight for the rocker by the fire, curling into it like she belonged there. Victor lingered near the door, his fingers twitching at his sides. "You hungry?" Travis asked. Faye nodded, lips pressed tight. "They haven't eaten since yesterday." He headed to the kitchen without another word, pulling out leftover cornbread, beans, and salted pork. The kids ate like they hadn't seen food in days. Faye waited until they finished before she took a bite. After dinner, he showed them to the guest room. It was dusty but clean. He laid fresh blankets down, watching as Violet crawled into bed and Victor followed. Faye tucked them in gently, brushing hair from each forehead. "You get some rest too," he said, pausing at the door. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything." She looked at him, eyes softening just a little. "Thank you," he nodded. "Good night, Faye." She hesitated, then said quietly, "Good night, Travis." The next morning, he found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing the table like it owed her something. Violet was helping fold linens, her small hands clumsy but determined. Victor sat on the porch steps, watching the snow melt. "You do not have to do all this," Travis said, setting down a sack of feed. "You're guests." "We ain't guests," she replied without looking up. "We are just passing through." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Where you headed?" Her hands stilled. "Nowhere, not anymore." Something in her voice made him quiet. He waited. "My husband died in Kansas last winter. Fever. We were supposed to head west after the snow cleared, but the man who said he would help us disappeared, took our horse." "Took the money too?" Travis frowned. "So you walked, hitched rides, rode in wagons when we could, but when we crossed into Montana, folks started turning us away, said there was nothing for us here, that we were just mouths to feed. I figured if we could just make it to the mountains, I could find work, something." He looked at her then, really looked. She was not weak. She was worn thin, but there was steel in her spine. "You ain't just passing through anymore," he said. She blinked. "What?" "I cleared out the back room. It's yours now. Yours and the kids. I patched the stove pipe, fixed the windows. It'll hold heat fine." Her mouth parted, but no words came. "You can stay, as long as you need." She stared at him, eyes glossy with something she tried to blink away. "Why would you do that?" Travis shrugged. "Because you are not alone anymore." For a long moment, she just stood there. Then, slowly, she stepped forward and placed a hand on his chest. It was light, unsure. "Thank you," she whispered. He covered her hand with his. "You are welcome, Faye." The first light of morning crept through the frost-laced windows, casting a soft glow across the wooden floorboards. Travis was already outside, splitting kindling beside the lean-to, breath rising in slow clouds. The rhythm of the axe kept his thoughts from wandering too far, though they pressed just beneath the surface quiet questions about what would come next now that the house held more than just his own silence. Inside, Faye stood in the corner of the kitchen, sleeves damp to the elbow as she rinsed out a tin basin. Her fingers worked with practiced steadiness, and though her shoulders were drawn, her expression was different than the night before, less guarded, though not yet easy. Victor sat beneath the window, a discarded horseshoe in his lap, running his finger along the rusted iron. Violet was crouched near the hearth, setting small pine cones in a half circle. She spoke to them in a whisper, as though they could hear her. Travis stepped inside, the cold still clinging to his coat. He set the bundle of kindling near the stove and nodded toward the basin. "You don't have to do that," he said. Faye dried her hands on her skirt. "Seems fair. You gave us a roof." She paused, then added, "I'm used to earning what I'm given." He nodded, not because he agreed, but because he understood. "I've got a milk cow that needs seeing to. She's gone stubborn lately. Wouldn't say no to another pair of hands." She looked at him, brow raised slightly. "You sure?" "Only if you're willing. Not a requirement. I can manage it." With Violet trailing behind and Victor lingering at the threshold, they stepped into the yard. Snowmelt dripped from the eaves and the wind carried the scent of wet earth. Faye rolled up her sleeves again without comment as Travis led her toward the shed behind the barn. "She kicks if you rush her," he said. "Just talk quiet and move steady. She's not mean, just particular." Faye crouched beside the cow, her hands gentle but firm. Her movements were sure, and though the cow shifted once, she settled quick under Faye's touch. "Had a few dairy cows back in Missouri," Faye said, voice low. "Back when things were steady." Travis didn't ask what changed. He simply said, "She's taken to you better than she ever did me." Faye smiled faintly, not looking up. "Guess I'm good with things that don't say much." The day passed in quiet pieces. Travis fixed a latch on the chicken coop while Victor watched from a few feet away, saying nothing, but never far from reach. Violet followed Faye around the yard, collecting fallen feathers and stuffing them into her apron pocket. Midday brought a thaw, and the yard turned thick with mud. Travis offered her an extra pair of boots that had belonged to his older brother, once too worn for him now, but still sound. She took them without protest. Later, as dusk drew shadows across the hills, Faye stood at the edge of the field staring out at the fading light. Travis joined her, arms folded across his chest. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Used to. After my brother died, I figured I'd sell off what I could and head south, but I never went, not sure what stopped me." She glanced over. "Maybe you were waiting for something." "Maybe," he said, "or someone." She didn't speak right away. The wind shifted and she pulled her shawl tighter. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "I never planned to be doing this alone." "You're not," he said. "Not anymore." Her hands tightened around the wool, but she didn't move away. "I'm not looking for rescue. I'm not offering one," he said calmly. "Just a place to rest, maybe build something if you want to." She looked at him then, really looked. Whatever she saw made her voice soften. "You always this patient," he gave a slow nod, "mostly with horses and fences." A breath of laughter escaped her lips, brief but real. Then she turned back toward the house, her boots sinking a little into the mud as she walked. That night, after the children had fallen asleep in a tangle of limbs and quilts, Faye stood near the hearth, her hands resting on the edge of the mantel. You should know, she said, eyes on the fire. I don't scare easy. But I don't trust quick either. I wouldn't expect you to, Travis replied. She turned slightly toward him. I'm still figuring out if we'd be better off moving on. He met her gaze squarely. You could, but you don't have to. The silence stretched, but it wasn't heavy. She stepped closer, not touching, just sharing the warmth of the fire. I'll help where I can, she said. Don't expect anything in return. I wouldn't ask for anything you didn't offer, he said. She nodded once, then turned back to the flames. Later, as he lay in his room, the walls no longer felt as hollow. He could hear the soft rhythm of another breath beyond the door, and somewhere in the quiet, the sound of a chair creaking as Faye settled in beside the hearth to watch the embers fade. Snow still clung to the higher ridges, but the valley floor was beginning to thaw, and with it came the slow, necessary work of spring. Travis had been up before the sun, hauling fencing posts out to the north pasture where elk had trampled through during the last storm. When he returned to the house, boots caked in mud, he found the children sitting on the porch steps, Violet humming tunelessly while Victor worked a piece of twine into knots. They glanced up as he passed but said nothing, already woven into the rhythm of the place. Inside, Faye stood at the table, rolling flour into dough with the side of her palm. Her hair was pulled back with a strip of blue calico. He noticed the way she pressed her weight into the motion, steady and unhurried. Wasn't expecting biscuits, Travis said, setting his gloves on the chair by the doorway. She didn't glance up. I found dry yeast in the back cupboard, figured it'd be a shame to let it go to waste. He leaned against the frame, watching her knead. You find everything you need. There's a crack in the bin where you keep the meal, she replied. If you've got muslin, I can stitch up a liner, keep the mice out. I'll check the trunk, think there's some in there. She nodded once, then returned to the dough. The room filled with the smell of warming flour and faint wood smoke. He didn't offer to help, and she didn't ask him to. Later that day, while the children played near the edge of the creek, Faye joined Travis by the wagon shed where he was shaping new boards for the chicken coop. She wore a man's coat over her dress, sleeves rolled to her elbows, and carried a pail of nails. I can hold the planks if your shoulder's still bothering you, she said. It's fine, he replied, then added, but I won't stop you. She crouched beside him, steadying the board as he drove the nail in with measured strikes. They worked without rush, the sound of hammering folding into the quiet rush of water and wind. Your son doesn't speak much, Travis said, adjusting the beam. He did before, she replied. He watches now, measures things before he trusts them. He nodded, leaving the silence untouched between them. After a while she asked, How long's this place been yours? 6 years, he said. Took it over after my brother passed. Wasn't much then, just the barn and a lean-to. I built the house the following spring. Built it alone, some of it. Got help from a neighbor when the roof needed setting. He's gone east now, married a girl from Illinois. She looked toward the hills. It's good land. It is, he said. Lonely sometimes. She didn't answer, but her gaze lingered on the horizon before settling back on the coop. The hinges are rusted through. I can boil them in vinegar if you've got any. I'll bring some out. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Travis poured 2 mugs of coffee and carried one to where Faye sat near the hearth, mending a torn hem. I've been thinking, he said. She looked up, thread still looped through her fingers. There's a schoolhouse in Hamilton, he continued. It's a ride, but not far. The teacher's getting on in years, might be she'd take to having help. Faye didn't speak right away. She set her sewing aside and accepted the coffee. I haven't taught, she said. Not properly, you read, he said. You count, you've got more patience than most. She turned the mug in her hands. It'd be steady, he nodded, if you want it. She looked at him, eyes searching. You offering because you think I need purpose? Or because you want me to stay? I want you to have a choice, he said. But I'd rather you didn't leave. She watched him for a long moment, then took a sip of the coffee. Then I'll ride into town come Sunday. See what she says. He let out a slow breath, the kind that had been waiting too long to be released. All right. Faye leaned back slightly, the firelight catching the edges of her face. And what about you, Travis Allard? What do you want? He met her eyes. I want to share this table with someone who sees it the way I do, not perfect but worth mending. She set her mug down. I never expected to find anything like that again. Maybe you didn't find it, he said. Maybe you built it. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached across the space between them and rested her hand over his, fingers threading through his with quiet certainty. The room was still except for the crackle of the fire. When Travis rose to bank the coals, she stood too, following him to the door where the night pressed soft and dark against the glass. For a long time they stood there together, listening to the wind move through the pines, neither speaking, neither needing to. Inside, the house no longer echoed. It breathed. The wind carried the scent of thawed soil and damp pine as April settled over the valley in fits and starts. The creek behind the house had risen with the melt, fast-moving and clear now, whispering through the brush like a secret never meant for words. Faye stood at the edge of the pasture, one hand shading her eyes against the morning sun. She watched as Travis and Victor moved along the fence line, the boy trailing close but not quite at his heel. Travis handed him the hand drill, showing him the way to brace the bit. Victor didn't speak, but he nodded, every motion careful, deliberate. Faye didn't call out. She knew better than to interrupt something that had only just begun to take root. Behind her, Violet was in the shallow garden bed near the porch, digging her fingers into the soft earth. She had a small tin pail beside her, half full of stones and worm castings. Faye crouched beside her, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. "Try not to pull up the roots," she said gently. "The onions won't grow right if you do." Violet squinted down, then nodded, her hand shifting to the side of the sprout rather than its crown. Inside, the house had changed in small, unspoken ways. The clock on the mantel ticked with the weight of shared hours now. The linens on the guest bed smelled of sun and creek water, not disuse. There were boots by the door smaller than Travis's, and a child's shawl hung on the peg beside his coat. That evening, as the light turned gold across the fields, Travis stepped onto the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. Faye was mending the straps on one of Violet's shoes with a curved needle and thread she'd brought from her satchel. She glanced up without pausing. "She's got a habit of dragging her heels when she walks," she said. "Wears through leather faster than you'd expect." Travis sat on the top step, stretching his legs out. "I'll cut a thicker sole next time. I've got scraps in the loft of the shed." She tied off the stitch, then set the shoe aside. "You always keep everything, if it might be useful." She leaned back against the post, her hands resting in her lap. "We left behind more than I meant to. There was a blanket, my mother's. I packed it 3 times, but something always had to be left for something else. Bread, matches. A coat." He didn't offer comfort, he just waited. "I've been thinking about the schoolhouse," she said after a pause. "Mrs. Howe asked if I'd come twice a week. She said some of the older boys won't sit still unless someone's keeping their eyes on them." Travis nodded. "You going to take it?" "I already said yes." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You tell the children?" "Not yet. I want to be sure Victor's all right with it. He still checks for me when he wakes, even if he won't say it." Travis leaned his elbow on his knee, watching the sun dip low behind the ridge. "He'll settle in time. He's learning the rhythm out here, same as the rest of us." She turned her head, studying him. "Do you want a family, Travis?" His gaze didn't waver. "I want what lasts, not just names in a Bible or shadows in a photograph. I want people who stay when the weather turns." Faye looked down at her hands. "I've been trying not to want anything too big." "You don't have to keep your wants small," he said, voice steady. "Not here." The screen door creaked behind them and Violet patted out, blinking sleep from her eyes. She crawled into Faye's lap without a word, tucking her face against her chest. Travis shifted to his feet. "I'll get the kettle on." Faye pressed her cheek to the top of Violet's head. "She gets dreams sometimes, wakes up looking for something we've already lost." He paused at the doorway. "She's not the only one." When the house had quieted again, and the children were tucked into quilts still warm from the fire, Faye stepped into the kitchen. Travis was scraping the last of the ash from the stove, moving slow, as if he knew she was coming but didn't want to break the moment. She crossed the room and laid her hand on his arm. He straightened, meeting her eyes. I never wanted to start over, she said. I wanted to end somewhere, somewhere I could stop running. This could be that place, he said. If you want it to be, she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached up and pressed her forehead to his chest, her breath soft against the worn flannel. His hand came to rest at her back, gentle, certain, no promises spoken. Just the quiet truth of what had already begun. By late May, the cottonwoods were greening fast along the creek, and the scent of damp grass carried through the open windows. The house had taken to its new shape without protest. Tools found their places again. Meals fell into quiet routines, and the porch always had someone watching from it now, even if just a child with a pine needle tucked behind one ear. Faye poured warm water into a basin on the back porch, rinsing the dust from Violet's hands after she'd trailed Travis to the far paddock and returned with fingers full of dirt. The girl squirmed but didn't complain, and afterward ran off barefoot, chasing the hens with a stick she claimed was a sword. Victor sat on the porch rail, carving lines into a piece of soft wood. He didn't look up when Faye passed, though he leaned slightly toward her as she walked by, the way he did when he wanted her near but didn't want to say it. She squeezed his shoulder gently and kept on. Inside, Travis had cleared a space on the table for a new ledger, lining columns with the corner of a square. Faye stepped in and set a folded cloth beside him. I got word from Mrs. Howe, she said. She wants me to stay on through harvest. Said the younger ones listen better when it's me reading. Travis looked up. You want to? I do, she said, but only if it still works with everything here. Nothing's unsteady, he replied. You're part of this place now. That doesn't change. She sat opposite him, tucking her hands beneath the edge of the table. You're not afraid I'll get restless? I think you've already gone farther than most would, he said. And I think you're choosing this now, not just surviving it. She studied him closely. You always speak like you've already weighed the answers. He shook his head. I speak like I've lived out the wrong ones. The next morning, Travis rode into town with Victor seated behind him on the saddle. It wasn't for need, just for the boy, giving him the shape of the world a little wider than the field and the barn. They came back with a sack of nails, a bolt of muslin, and an old slate board Violet had asked for without saying a word, just pointed at it in the window and looked at Faye with eyes too hopeful to ignore. Evenings stretched longer now, the sun lingering over the far hills. Faye and Travis walked the fence line after supper, checking the wire where elk still pressed too close. She carried her gloves in her hands, the stitching along one thumb coming loose. I could mend those, Travis said. I know, she replied, but I like doing it myself. He glanced at her. You always keep a little distance. I have to, she said. It's how I know what's real. Is this? He asked. She stopped walking. The field around them was gold with dying light, the grass still warm underfoot. She turned to him slowly. Yes, she said. It is. He stepped closer, not touching, just near. Then why are you still holding back? She looked down at her gloves. Because the last time I believed in something, it died on me. The difference now, he said gently, is that I'm still standing here. She looked up. And if I let go of the rest, then we build a life, he said. Not just a roof. She let the gloves fall from her hands. When they returned to the house, the children were asleep. Violet curled into the curve of the quilt, Victor with one arm thrown over the slate board. Faye moved quietly through the room, then stepped out onto the porch again, where Travis waited. He held out her gloves. She took them, then placed them on the bench beside her and sat down beside him. I don't want a life that feels borrowed, she said. I want one that's ours. He reached for her hand, palm to palm. You've got it, he said. In the months that followed, the house filled in its quiet corners. Faye rose early for the schoolhouse and returned with dust on her hems and stories about children who said things they didn't mean and some who did. Travis spent long days with the fence, the cattle, the land, the shape of his life unchanged, but no longer empty. Victor took to carving small animals at first, then more. By winter, he'd whittled a likeness of the house, right down to the windows and porch rail. Violet learned to read from the Bible, her voice soft and stumbling and full of pride. One Sunday, when the sun sat low and the snow had just begun to feather in the pastures, Travis unwrapped a length of blue wool and handed it to Faye in the kitchen. She unrolled it to find a dress pattern drawn in pencil, simple and strong, with sleeves she could roll up. "I want to marry you," he said. "Not because I need to, because I want to live every day with you and the children beside me." She didn't answer for a long time. She unfolded the wool, ran her fingers over the lines, and then looked up. "Yes," she whispered. "I want that too." They married beneath the cottonwoods in early spring. Violet wore a crown of dried grasses, and Victor stood beside Travis, his hand clenched tight around a carved ring box. The neighbors came quietly, bringing bread and preserves, and the preacher said nothing about pasts, only about choosing each other now, and every day forward. Faye wore the blue dress she'd stitched herself, and Travis wore his brother's vest, the seams let out to fit him again. When he kissed her, it was without weight or worry, just truth and warmth and the long-earned ease of choosing a future. They built more than a roof. They built a home. Through seasons of thaw and frost, the house stayed full. Laughter found its way into the corners. Faye taught until the children didn't need the board anymore. Travis passed the fence work to Victor in time, and Violet planted wildflowers along the edge of the porch. And always, at the end of every day, Faye would find Travis, whether in the barn or the field or by the fire, and place her hand over his, steady and sure. Neither of them ever left again.